What's going on, guys? Happy Friday. We're looking at a bit of a green day. Most of the Bitcoin miners are green. A lot of the market is green. Risk on is mostly green here. A stark contrast to this whole week, which has mostly been red. Now in this video, I want to talk about MicroStrategy. We have news that they've been selling their Bitcoin. Let's see what Michael Saylor says about this. Also, BTBT reported earnings. We're going to glance over it. I'll give you my thoughts on BTBT and MicroStrategy. Or strategy. And we've got some things to look at for Bitcoin as well. Now, Arkham, which is a crypto intelligence firm, on Friday they released data indicating that MSTR has been selling their Bitcoin holdings, or at least their Bitcoin holdings have fallen to 437,000 from 484,000 coins, meaning about 47,000 coins less. However, on CNBC, Michael Saylor himself denied any selling, instead stating that we are buying. We'll report our next buys on Monday, as they typically do. He also added that the company is not only buying, but accelerating their purchases of Bitcoin. I'm fairly comfortable at this level. The strategy's debt is about 4.5 years out. And finally, Saylor expects Bitcoin to rally from here. Oh god, guys, some of these comments just blow my mind. Saylor, begging you to hold your Bitcoin and to continue either losing money or profits. I personally think MSTR is doing alright with its roughly 15x from its crypto winter lows, massively outperforming Bitcoin, which is currently right around 6 or 7x from its crypto winter lows. And I also wanted to mention, in terms of MicroStrategy, their net asset value versus Bitcoin is at a multiple of 1.2. It's very close to their Bitcoin holdings in terms of their asset value. Typically, buying this right around 1 turns out to be a fantastic play. Now, while MicroStrategy has done roughly a 15x from its crypto winter lows, it is currently down a whopping 60-something% from its all-time high. Now, one thing I want to show you that's very eye-opening is we haven't seen strategy this oversold since 2022, which that might have perked up some of your ears. Of course, we know that 2022 was our low point. MicroStrategy was as low as $13 in 2022 when it flashed oversold, which, to be fair, was a little more oversold than we are here, but there is not a single point that was as close to oversold as we are now versus 2022. If you're looking for a good dip buy on MicroStrategy, a good discount, I think now is a great time. While crypto is pretty fearful, while MicroStrategy is pretty heavily oversold, which we don't see very often. And like I said, we haven't seen this since like May of 2022. One thing you might want to watch out for is for MicroStrategy to form a bottom, form a base. It's hitting new recent lows. We want to see the start of some higher lows. Also, look for a bullish divergence like we saw back in 2022. We saw a higher low on the RSI here while the price went lower, and we didn't go really any lower than that. This basically marked the bottom here in May of 2022 after this bullish divergence being heavily oversold. People that bought during this time or around this time are still deep in the green, despite MicroStrategy's massive pullback from its all-time highs. I personally think MicroStrategy is a good deal here. While of course it could go lower, and you might want to space out your buys. For instance, if we do drop under this $200 psychological level, which we basically bounced right near, this would be a great area, in my opinion, to be accumulating at, from $130 to $200. This range where MicroStrategy consolidated, also previous top, likely to play out as a support. Now, in terms of the weekly, this range that I was talking about, the lower point of this range, this roughly 133, would be putting it right at the 200 MA on the weekly. So I do think acquiring MicroStrategy between $200 and $130 would be a good play. And the lower it goes, the lower it is versus its Bitcoin value. I would expect on any weakness that MicroStrategy will do worse than Bitcoin, presenting even better buying opportunities as it gets closer to its net asset value of Bitcoin. And in terms of the weekly, we are getting very close to oversold, although not there yet, basically flirting with 30. Back in 2022, we got barely oversold, and it basically quickly recovered and rallied to new all-time highs. Long story short, I do think MicroStrategy or strategy is the buy here. Next up, I want to look over BTBT. This is Bit Digital. They're an Ethereum play, first and foremost. They're basically phasing out their Bitcoin mining, which makes sense because they are far from the most efficient Bitcoin miner. They're still mining in the 20s in terms of their joules per terahash. We have the most efficient Iron and CleanSpark right here in the 15 range, while BTBT is mining at like 22 joules per terahash. They are now first and foremost an Ethereum play with a large Ethereum holding. They did beat their earnings. They had a surprise beat in terms of earnings. They beat their revenue very slightly, basically came in line. But the massive thing here is the beat, from expecting to be a loss to seeing a profit this quarter. Also, in terms of the daily, we are getting near oversold. The last time we were close to this level was back in February of 2025, which was near a bottom. but we did go lower and we actually see a bullish divergence. See this bullish divergence here? We saw the price go lower. The RSI started recovering. February 2025 marked a bottom for the RSI. April of 2025 marked a bottom for BTBT's price. And of course, we know that April is when the rally started for Bitcoin, for the Bitcoin miners, for iron, etc. For BTBT, of course, this started the rally from $1.60 and ran to 450. Now we're sitting at 250, basically in the middle of this range. We did break this trend line that I had here, and you saw a big reaction on the failure of it and the failure of the 200 MA. That didn't hold up. You saw a big reaction. Looks like we broke our support here of 245. I would want to see where this levels out at. It is not done falling. You might get a lucky bounce here, but it's a falling knife, as you can clearly see. If you like BTBT where it's at value-wise, price-wise, I think it's a buy. Technical-wise, it might be due for more drop. Look for a support to be established. Look for some sideways action, some consolidation, maybe trying to use this as a support, this 250 area, and holding over our low of 235. If we break under this low, we're likely to come down towards the psychological 2, in my opinion. That would be a fantastic time to add BTBT. I will link their earnings down below from their investor relations, but let me show you what they're looking like. Right now, this is a $700 million company. They have about $423 million just in digital assets and about $200 million in cash. This alone gets them right near their actual valuation. There's hardly any growth priced in. This stock is basically trading at its balance sheet just about. But you can see that their average efficiency was 22 joules per terahash. Definitely not the most efficient. They did mine 64 Bitcoin in the quarter, but as they mentioned, they are reducing their hash rate, currently at 1.9 exahash. They're basically phasing out their Bitcoin mining, focusing on Ethereum. And I do think this is a good play on ETH. I like BitDigital. I like where their value's at right now. They have a decent amount of cash if they do see an unprofitable quarter. If BitDigital doesn't respond relatively well to this earnings once the market digests it, if next week we start selling off, I do think buying at 2 would be a great entry point. Previous support here, many points of support, previous resistance. I would think BTBT would find support at 2, and that would put it into probably pretty deeply oversold in terms of the daily. All right, now Bitcoin. As you guys know, we are literally within days of seeing this death cross, and I've been saying this almost every video because I think it's very important to see the trend. Every death cross we have seen a bottom. We have bottomed out on a large amount of fear, a lot of worry, people thinking we're going much lower, and we do the opposite. We go much higher, hit a new all-time high on that flash of the death cross. Again here, and again here. We have done this every time this cycle on a death cross. It has marked our low. I'm thinking we may see the same thing here because of how oversold we are, because of how violent this drop has been. One thing that has me worried that we don't see a repeat is the weekly candle. We're now under our 50 MA in terms of the weekly. We haven't been under the 50 MA on the weekly since like 2023. This whole cycle, basically, we've been riding it as a support. In past cycles, once you find it as resistance, you typically don't come back from that. Once you find it as resistance, you don't come back until the next cycle. That's one thing that has me worried in terms of Bitcoin. Of course, it's a weekly candle. We close the week on like Sunday. So there are a couple of days to see Bitcoin possibly recover and get back over the 50 MA. That's what I would hope for. Over the next couple of days, we see Bitcoin rally, maybe rally on that death cross that might flash any day here. But those are two things you want to really closely watch for Bitcoin. We also have this falling wedge, which typically brings a breakout to the upside. That's a good sign. Also, potentially, but we need to let the time develop, a possible RSI divergence. You could see the RSI possibly setting a equal low. If we can get a bounce here, if we keep selling off, then we're going to see a lower low on the chart, and we're going to see a lower low on the RSI. But if we get a good, bounce, which it looks like we might be doing at the support line here, if we can get a bounce, this will be a bullish RSI divergence. You'd see a lower low, but you'd see the RSI not hitting a lower low, which could in fact mark a bottom. We do have some confluence. If we see this RSI divergence, if we see that death cross, which typically marks a bottom, and if we see Bitcoin start bouncing here on its weekly candle, regaining the 50 MA on the weekly, I would think Bitcoin is going to recover and going to run to new all-time highs. We are still at extreme fear. We have been at extreme fear for the last couple of days. These times are typically great times to add. When there's a lot of fear in the market, when you're anywhere between 20 and 10, typically, that's near a bottom for Bitcoin. Extreme fear can be a sign that investors are too worried and could be a buying opportunity. And when getting too greedy, the market is usually due for a correction. And then if you're curious about how they source their data, here it is. They measure volatility. They measure the momentum and volume of the market. They look at social media sentiment, the dominance of different coins, and Google Trends data. They combine all this and get a number between 0 and 100 of either extreme fear or extreme greed or in between. And right now we are at extreme fear. Typically a good time to add. I mean, in hindsight, throughout this cycle, every time there was insane fear like this, it was a buying opportunity. One time that reminds me of this time is Mt. Gox, when we ran down to 49,000 and we quickly recovered on that death cross, rallied to new all-time highs. People thought we were going so much lower. People thought Mt. Gox was going to continue selling off the market and we're going to enter like an early bear market. That didn't happen. We rallied to new all-time highs and the cycle continues. Now, how are you guys feeling today? Do you think Bitcoin is going to recover, or are we in for more pain? One thing that I showed you guys yesterday is that we're at like a 50-50 split on a rate cut. That has definitely changed things in terms of risk on market. People are getting a little hesitant there because the Fed may be forced to hold rates and not lower rates. And the fact that we're kind of coming in blind, a lot of the October data we're not going to get, that also has the market a little shaken up. But let me know how you guys are feeling about BTBT's earnings. How do you feel about MicroStrategy? Is it a buy for you? Where is a good buy for it in your opinion? Thanks as always for watching, guys, and have a good weekend.